Hi, I'm Matt Gibson with Sounds Like Beer, and today we're in Toronto's Junction neighborhood at the soon-to-open Henderson Brewing. I'm here to talk with founder Steve Himel about why he decided to try and resurrect Toronto's brewing history. Let's go have a chat. So, thank you for having us here. I always want to start by finding out sort of how you got into the craft beer world. What was it that happened in your life, whether you were a home brewer or there was a really great beer that you had that made you think, oh, this is an area I want to pursue?
Well, it goes back to high school actually. As I think as any high school kid in Ontario at the time, or even probably now, thinks beer is kind of this magical thing. Particularly the way it's advertised to us, the role it plays with our older brothers and sisters. You getting to the age of majority, beer is almost the cup at the end of that.
Right.
List. Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I at the time when I was sort of at a high school or my first year of university was during the first beer renaissance in Ontario. At the time that Sleeman had come online, Brick, Upper Canada, and Connor's Beer, which isn't around anymore, which is where I worked.
Okay.
I just went and knocked on their door and said, I'd like a job. And from there I went on to become an apprentice brewer and finally a brewer. And that's when I got the bug. When you participate in that alchemy, turning the four ingredients into beer at the end.
Yeah.
I still, to this day, it's almost like watching a plane take off. Every time I see it, I scratch my head and think, how does that work? It's the same with beer. So that's how I got into it.
I think by the end of this year, there'll be something like 12 or 13 breweries and brew pubs within a 10, 15-minute bike ride. So
Yes.
why did you, and then including you guys, why did you guys decide this is the area we want to be in, this is where we want to open a brewery, this is where we want to sort of make our stand?
It was very important for us to be in Toronto. Toronto has this unbelievable and mostly unheard brewing history.
Right.
And we really wanted to be a part of that. And so we started in Toronto. And then as we began to look around, we realized that this part of town was the best part of town. It had a history of breweries. It had a history of brewing.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of great space around here, and we loved the feeling or the vibe in the neighborhood. It felt like it was the right kind of place. So.
Right. And speaking of space, I mean, I'm walking around. It's a huge space. It's beautiful. You guys have done a great job with the tap room. Why was the space so important to you in terms of bringing people in, having that actual, this is our brewery thing, and not just sort of being a hidden back warehouse somewhere?
Well, Mark and I both have been in the beer business for basically our whole careers in one way or another, and I think that we both share that real love for beer and brewing. Mm-hmm. And I think we, even when this was just a twinkle in our eyes, the idea was to share it with the people who come in and drink our product. We wanted everybody to feel like it was kind of their brewery. Mm-hmm. We weren't looking to just build a beer factory that would be behind closed doors. We wanted people to feel like that's where the brewery is, and that they could come in and share in that with us at any time.
I feel like when sort of craft brewing started coming back into Ontario, say 10 years ago, it was almost enough to just sort of show up and say, here, I have something that's a little different from what everyone else is making. Now, with more and more breweries coming around, you really need to sort of have what some people say, a unique selling proposition.
Well, I think that's a little bit of an unfair question, because I think that at the time, it seems like that's the next thing you have to do, but the truth is you just have to make great beer. We just want to make great beer in this neighborhood, and that we think is enough. Now, what's our USP, right? Well, I was always a little bit disappointed that the Toronto brewing community wasn't maybe banging the drum as loud as it could about our great history. When you think about great brewing cities in North America, I don't know if Toronto comes to mind as having a great history, but we do. We have a history that's just as significant and broad as any other city, like Boston or Chicago or Seattle or Portland or any of these other places. And in a sense, we wanted to tell that story a little bit. So our flagship beer, Henderson's Best, is a reinterpretation of the very first beer brewed in Toronto by Robert Henderson. Okay. It's where we got our name. It's what sort of inspired us to get into the beer business. Mm-hmm. And we have sort of reinterpreted that original recipe in a modern context, and that's kind of the beer we stand behind. I think that we really want Henderson's Best to remain our flagship, and for the most part, our one and only beer. It's like the great bread that we make. Now, that said, we will continue to make lots of different kinds of beers, but we're not going to, our plan is not to continue to reissue these beers in kind of a mainstream way. I think, come by the brewery. You can always get a pint of best, and then we'll probably have 3 or 4 other things on tap at all times. We have a series where we're going to do a different beer each month. It's called our I'd series. And the way this is going to work is we're presenting Mark, or I'm presenting Mark with a Toronto story. Mark's job is then to bring that story to life through a beer.
Oh, cool.
I think for the customer, they get to come in here and try something that has a backstory that is going to be unique, and then it's gone. So there's this sense of getting to try some experimental stuff without having to commit to a big launch and all the things that go with that.
And it brings people in, which is what you always sort of want, because that's
I hope so.
the home base, right?
Well, plus I really want people to, when people come in here, I want them to get an appreciation for brewing and for beer. And what Henderson's Best is built to be the kind of beer that anyone can drink. It's a very tasty kind of regular beer, to use that pejorative term. But at the same time, we're going to have all these other things that are interesting, and we want any customer can come in here, and if what we brewed that month isn't for them, well, there's always something that's a little more a little bit more approachable, I guess is the term they use.
Of course. Now, you mentioned before, you want people to be coming in, you want to be sort of part of the neighborhood, and as we're seeing, Toronto is growing as a brewing community. What do you think that breweries and brewers and even the municipal government or the provincial government should be doing to really help promote this growth industry, because it's still very small, but I think it could get a lot bigger.
The pre-prohibition model in Ontario was exactly the model that's growing again. Unfortunately, for the last 50 or 70 years, there's been industrialized brewing with a lot of industrialized brewing messaging, i.e. advertising. And I think that's done a good job making the typical beer drinker guide them in a certain direction. I think that for some people who drink, let's say, well, I won't say a brand, a more generic beer.
Sure.
I think for some of those people, there might be some fear around what craft beer is really all about. Maybe they've had the opportunity to try something that is a little more aggressive on their palate.
I was going to say, like an Imperial IPA is the first craft beer they try, and then they're terrified for the rest of the time.
Or, for example, let's just take I will name a beer, which I'll say Bone Shaker, let's say, or Mad Tom. Both great beers, both beers that go out of their way to be hop forward. But if you had been drinking a beer like, let's say, Coors Light, and then you were to try a Bone Shaker, I think that you would be painting craft beers with a broad brush based on that one experience.
Of course.
And so I think there's a real opportunity to talk about how craft brewing, small breweries, neighborhood breweries, are different than maybe what you think.
Right.
And like just here, we've got 12 breweries already, just in this neighborhood, within a reasonable walk, or certainly a reasonable bike ride of each other. And what a great experience it would be to spend a day just visiting 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah.
And so you could do that over 2 or 3 weekends.
I did that a couple weekends ago. It was great.
It is great.
It was before you guys were open, but
yeah,
there's some other ones. It was I think I did Bandit and Junction and Reinhardt, and it was a lovely afternoon.
Each one of those is a little bit different.
Yeah.
And even if all of us made the exact same beer, even if all of us made the exact same recipe, there would still be enough differences in the way our equipment works, in the way we treat our water, and all the different things that we do that would make those beers a little bit different. Each of us would be putting our stamp on those beers.
Well, thanks so much for telling me everything about Henderson Brewery. Obviously, we need to try some beer now. So what have you guys got on tap that we should give a try?
Well, we have our Henderson's Best, which is our feature beer. The truth is that we're not open really until June 4th.
Okay.
So we only have the best on tap.
All right.
And these tanks are all full of all the other goodies.
Well, then let's go get the best.
Wonderful.
All right.
Hope you enjoy it.